Hello, my name is Anneshia Freeman. I'm also known as the locksmith because I make keys for locks in the mind. I'm a master's level therapist, and my specialty is cognitive restructuring, meaning I specialize in exposing and challenging dysfunctional, unconscious beliefs that make decisions for people without their conscious awareness. I also provide people with tools, real tools to help them reprogram their minds with functional beliefs. Welcome to episode 3 in my Facebook and YouTube live series entitled Healing from a Trauma Based Belief System. During these episodes, I've already did episode 1 and 2, and if you're interested in watching them, you can scroll down the feed later and watch episode 1 and 2. Each episode in this series can stand alone, so you don't have to have watched the previous episodes to benefit from today's series, to the episode in today's series. So during these live streams, I use certain terms interchangeably. So when you hear me use the terms lies, issues, unaddressed issues, or the buttons people push, I'm referring to the same thing. I'm referring to dysfunctional, unconscious, trauma based beliefs that cause people to engage in self defeating behaviors repeatedly despite the consequences. So during episode 1, I talked about trauma-based beliefs that affects people's relationships with themselves. In episode 2, I discussed several trauma-based beliefs that affect people's relationships with others. Today, I'm going to talk about several lies or trauma-based beliefs that affects people's sense of efficacy, that affect the way they think about the learning and education process. So, the term for people who may not be familiar with the term efficacy, that the dictionary defines that term as the ability to produce a desired or intended result. So, there's some trauma based beliefs that cause people to feel that they can't accomplish goals, that they can't go to the next level. It makes them feel inadequate in comparisons to what they see other people being able to do. And these trauma based beliefs also impact the way people think about education. It affects the way they learn or what they believe they're entitled to do to learn. So I'm going to start by discussing how 3 beliefs that affects people's sense of efficacy and how they think about the learning and education process. I'm going to talk about how these trauma-based beliefs were programmed into people's minds during the formative years. The brain is developed, the mind is programmed. The mind is programmed during those critical foundation years by how a person is treated and by what a person observes. There's other ways, and there are exceptions to the rule. Some people's minds are programmed with trauma-based beliefs later in life. There are exceptions to the rule, but primarily the programming happens during the formative years. That's why they call them the formative years. So the first trauma-based belief that I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about how it was programmed into a person's mind, and then later I'll talk about how it affects an individual's adult life. But the first trauma-based lie I'm going to discuss today is learning is associated with pain and humiliation. Now, these beliefs are unconscious. So a person who's been programmed with this lie, this trauma-based belief, wouldn't walk into a room and say, hello, I believe that learning is associated with pain and humiliation, and I believe that the only way I can learn is to go to the school of hard knocks. They wouldn't consciously articulate that, but they will say and do things that will demonstrate that they struggle with this belief, and I'll talk about that later. So first, how can this belief be programmed into a child's mind? Well, let's talk about maltreatment. That's one of the ways. So if a child is raised in an environment in which he he or she is berated while being instructed how to do things, or if the child is harshly critiqued while trying to learn via trial and error because they're not being taught properly, then the child can be programmed with the lie or the trauma-based belief learning is associated with pain and humiliation. If a child is raised in an environment in which the child observes his or her parents, siblings, or other people learning through pain and humiliation. If a child is raised in an environment where they overhear people saying things like, well, I finally learned my lesson, and the child has observed these people doing the same things over and over again and reaping negative consequences, and then finally they say they learned their lesson. The child is being programmed with this trauma-based belief. Learning is associated with pain and humiliation, which will affect the child's sense of efficacy and how they feel about the learning and education process. So the next trauma-based belief that I'm going to talk about is you have to figure everything out by yourself. So if a child is raised in an environment in which he or she is not being formally taught how to do certain things, like not being taught how to do dishes properly, not taught how to clean their rooms properly, or not taught personal grooming techniques, but the child is berated and harshly criticized for not knowing how to do these tasks, then the child can internalize the trauma-based belief you have to figure everything out by yourself. Is if the child is always told to do their homework by themselves, and the child is saying, well, I don't understand. So I've worked with people who have been told, and I mean, I've heard this over and over and over again, that they were raised in an environment in which someone would say, you better sit down at that table and do your homework, and don't you get up until you've done it right. And the child is like, I don't know how to do it. And they were told, well, you better figure it out. So this unconscious belief, this lie, you have to figure everything out by yourself, can be programmed into the child's mind. So the next belief, the third belief that I'm going to talk about today, is you are expected to possess information automatically that you were never taught. This is another trauma-based belief that can affect a person's sense of efficacy and how they feel about the learning and education process. So if a child is raised in an environment in which he or she is ridiculed, harshly critiqued, or belittled for not possessing information that other people possess, then this lie or trauma-based belief can be implanted into the child's unconscious mind. And so I'll give an example. My mother used to say, common sense should have told you. And she was saying that I was supposed to automatically know certain things that she hadn't taught me. And I'm not here to character assassinate my mother, God rest her soul. She was raising me the way she had been raised. These trauma-based beliefs can be passed from generation to generation. And so she didn't do it on purpose. I've worked with a lot of parents in my 21 years working in the counseling and therapy field. And I've never worked with a parent that said, Ms. Freeman, I programmed my child with a lot of unhealthy beliefs on purpose. I've never, and I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I've never met a parent who told me that they intentionally wanted their child to walk around directives and causing them to engage in self-defeating behaviors repeatedly despite the consequences. I've never worked with parents who said that, but it's impact versus intent. So a lot of times people focus on the intent, and it's good to say, okay, well, I know people didn't try to intentionally put these trauma-based beliefs in me, but they're there, and now we have to work on the impact. So now I'm going to talk about how these trauma-based beliefs that I've spoken of, learning is associated with pain and humiliation. Learning is associated with pain and humiliation. You have to figure everything out by yourself, and you are expected to automatically possess certain information because others do. Let's talk about how these trauma-based beliefs can follow a person into their adult life and affect them. Because if there's no intervention, if there's no cognitive restructuring, these beliefs will follow people into their adult lives. And it's hard to fight an invisible enemy. These beliefs are unconscious. So, first, let's talk about how this lie that you learning is associated with pain and humiliation can affect an individual in their adult life. So this lie will cause a person to believe that they have to go to the school of hard knocks. They will believe that they have to learn everything the hard way. So I have an example. I mentor first generation college students and have for a long time. And I've worked with people who have this dysfunctional unconscious belief. And I don't mentor people who haven't been through my program, because I would have to keep mentoring them about the same behaviors. I would have to keep talking to them about the same behaviors over and over and over. And I'm not going to do that. I don't have that kind of time. So people go through my program and get my cognitive restructuring cards so that we can get to the root of the problem when we're addressing a behavior. So I have mentored some people who have went back to school, and these were non-traditional students. I've had a few over the couple decades that I've mentored people. I've had a few people who were working full-time jobs, had families, and would sign up for college. They got inspired. They want to go back and work on their education, but they would sign up for 4 or 5 classes their first semester at the university, and they were working full-time and had a family. And I would say, I recommend that you drop a couple of those classes, for your first semester until you get your college legs. You're putting too much on your plate. And some people listened to me and they respected my input and because they know that I had their best interests at heart, that I had my own accomplishments in academia, that I wasn't, trying to keep them from going after their goals. So some people listened. I had a few that was like, I got this, Miss Freeman, I can handle this. I'm like, okay. And so they had some bad experiences, and some people failed classes and was put on academic probation. And then later we would meet and talk about what happened. And I've had people tell me, well, I learned my lesson. And then we would talk about this toxic trauma-based belief, because this belief tells people that they have to learn through pain and humiliation, that they have to go to the school of hard knocks, that they're not eligible to learn from the experiences of others. And that's another way it affects it. This trauma-based belief tells people this is the only way you can learn, through pain and humiliation. You cannot listen to other people. You can't learn from other people's experiences. I heard a quote, and I can't remember who said it. I think it was one of my professors. I have 4 college degrees. I think it was one of my professors. I even Googled the quote before this live stream, trying to see if I could find the source, and I couldn't. So I don't know if my professor was the source or if he was quoting someone, because I like to give people credit when I quote them. But this is the quote that I heard some years ago. Whether the process is painful or not is irrelevant to the result. And I thought that was so powerful. I'm going to say it again. Whether the process is painful or not is irrelevant to the result. And what the quote is saying is that if someone learns something the hard way and someone else learns the exact same thing, but they learned from the experiences of others, and they didn't have to go through pain and humiliation. If they both learned the lesson, if they both are able to apply the lesson, then why go to the school of hard knocks if there's another lesson plan that you can avail yourself of? And I'll give an example. Let's say a person is in line, and I'm talking in a metaphor. They're in line and they're watching people jump off a cliff. And they're looking over like, wow, that looks painful. Oh, that person is being carried off on a stretcher. Oh, that person is being put in a cast. They had to put their arm in a cast or their leg in a cast. And then the next person, and they see the next person jump off the cliff, and they're like, wow, that person injured themselves too. That person does not have to jump off the cliff. They can get out the line. They can get out of the line and say, well, I learned from other people's experiences not to jump off cliffs. But there are some people who feel so that because of this trauma-based belief, and remember, it's unconscious, they will jump right off that same cliff, be in a full body cast, and be like, well, I finally learned my lesson. That's how powerful these unconscious trauma-based beliefs are. So now I'm going to talk about how this belief, you have to figure everything out by yourself, can affect a person in their adult life. So I call it the Professor You syndrome, that you have to teach yourself everything, that you can't learn from others. And so this particular lie or trauma-based belief can cause a person to take years to learn something they could have learned at a 2-day conference. That's how sinister this belief is. It's sneaky, because there are people who are struggling to try to figure things out, and they've been struggling for years. And this is all of these trauma-based beliefs that I talk about in every one of these episodes, I've had to heal from. So I understand them on a deep level. Plus, I've worked with people over 21 years, helping them coding these trauma-based beliefs and helping people get free. So I know how they work. And so this lie can cause people to take hours to try to figure something out that they could have watched a 60-second video to learn how to do. So I'll give you an example. Some years ago, I was still healing from this trauma-based belief, and I had made progress, but I still wasn't aware of how it was affecting me in little things, right? And so I had bought a high-powered stapler because my regular stapler wasn't powerful enough to staple 25-page reports, and I had a lot of those at the time. So I went and bought this expensive high-powered stapler and took it out the package, sat it on my desk, and of course I threw the wrapper away and the instructions. I didn't even look at the instructions, because who needs to read instructions for a stapler, right? And so a few weeks later, I decided to use the stapler. So I'm trying to load it, and I'm opening it, and I'm trying to load it the way I would a regular stapler, but it wasn't working. The staplers weren't going in, they weren't fitting, and I'm trying to pound them in, and I'm flipping it upside down, and all of this. And for about 60 minutes, an hour, I wrestled with this stapler. I was about to tear it up, because I was determined to make those staplers go into that stapler the way they did with others in the past. And then I realized in a moment that I was obeying this trauma-based belief. You have to figure everything out by yourself. And as soon as I realized that's what I was doing, I went online and I went to a search engine, put in the name of the stapler, and put in video instructions for loading that stapler. A video popped up that was literally 1 minute. It was 60 seconds long, that showed me how to load that stapler, and I was able to do it. But that's how subtle these trauma-based beliefs are. This belief, you have to figure everything out by yourself, can cause a person to refuse to go to the next level, because that person can feel overwhelmed by all of the tasks that the lie or the trauma-based belief is telling the person that they have to learn on their own. You have to, the belief says you have to figure everything out by yourself that you need to know for the next level. And so there's a lot of things that people have to learn when they advance in life. And this lie will cause people to be afraid, because it puts an unrealistic expectation on them. So some people stay stuck at a level where they're discontented, they feel dissatisfied, because that's not where they want to go. And they actually have the gifting and talent to go further, but this trauma-based belief is affecting their sense of efficacy and how they feel about the learning and education process. So now let's talk about the final trauma-based belief that I'm discussing today that affects people's sense of efficacy and how they feel about the learning and education process. So that trauma-based belief is you are expected to possess information automatically that you were never taught or else. And we don't even know what the or else is. These trauma-based beliefs will threaten and intimidate people without even telling them what the or else is, right? So let's talk about how this trauma-based belief can affect a person in their adult lives. So this belief causes people to believe they're not eligible for the learning curve like other people. It puts unrealistic expectations on people, just like the other two beliefs that I've talked about. This belief causes imposter syndrome because it will cause a person to believe that they're not entitled to the process that others have went through to obtain their level of expertise and their level of knowledge. This lie tells them you have to automatically possess some information that other people took 20 years to internalize. You should automatically know it. And that comes, as I said earlier, from being raised in environments where someone put that unrealistic expectation on them. Someone expected them to have some information that they had not been given as a child. And because the belief was stored in the person's unconscious mind, that belief has had power if there's no intervention because of its unknown property until it gets exposed. Once a person becomes aware of these trauma-based beliefs that I'm discussing, they get their power back. They have the ability to fight these unconscious beliefs. This is an unrealistic expectation. Someone had to teach us how to use a spoon, and we didn't do so well the very first time we had a spoon. Someone had to teach us how to use a toilet, and we didn't get that right the first time. It was a process. But this trauma-based belief will cause a person to fear new endeavors because the lie or the trauma-based belief is saying you don't have the information. You should already have the information necessary to go to that next level. And many people don't have it. They need to obtain it. And they see other people at that level. And then this dysfunctional belief is talking to them and saying, you're going to make yourself look like a fool. You're going to look ridiculous because the belief is telling them you should already know what all these other people know. And that's not the case. Everyone who has a certain skill set or a certain level of expertise, they were at one point in their lives novices. They didn't automatically become masters overnight. Even people who have certain unique gifts and skills, they still had to develop them over time. This trauma-based belief can also cause a person to be envious of other people who have acquired certain achievements because they feel, oh, these people have this special knowledge that I'm not able to obtain. And that's not the case. Those people had to do their due diligence to learn what they have, the information they have, and they had to do their due diligence to practice and make mistakes and learn from their mistakes. So I'm going to read the functional beliefs that challenge each of these trauma-based beliefs that we discussed today. So first, let's talk about the trauma-based lie. Learning is associated with pain and humiliation. Learning is associated with pain and humiliation when I refuse to utilize the other mechanisms available for acquiring information. There are a variety of ways I can learn. I can learn from the mistakes of others. I can read. I can go to school. I can get a mentor. I can acknowledge when I'm lacking in understanding and ask for clarity. First, I need to confront the internalized belief system that tells me I have to learn everything the hard way. The hard way is a last resort lesson plan. There are many other learning methods before I come to the painful and humiliating classroom of life's lessons. As a child, I may not have had a choice as to how I was taught, but that was then and this is now. I have a choice. I can choose the method in which I acquire information. I can choose my teachers. I will exercise my freedom of choice. So now I'm going to read the functional belief that challenges the trauma-based belief or lie. You have to figure everything out by yourself. No person is an island. I need the input of others in my life in order to make it. There is no way that I'm going to be able to figure out everything I need to know to successfully navigate life by myself. I will be running around for years trying to figure out something I could have gotten an answer for in a matter of minutes. I can ask for help and advice from others, but I need to use wisdom when choosing people to consult for information. Why would I ask someone who has never been to school to give me information about school? Why would I ask someone who is using drugs and alcohol for advice on how to live a clean and sober life? I have to make sure that I am looking to the learned when seeking information. There are people in the world who already know what I need to know and are willing to inform me. So now, finally, I'm going to read the functional belief that challenges the lie. You are expected to possess information automatically that you were never taught. I am supposed to be taught what I do not know. When I was a child, I may have been around people who did not understand the principles of teaching, and they expected me to automatically possess information that I was never taught or something bad happened. Well, that was then. This is now. I can choose my teachers. And I can find some who understand the principles of teaching, who are patient and understanding. I no longer have to pretend to have information that I do not possess. I am supposed to be taught. I will acknowledge when I don't know something. I will no longer act as if I have the answers and embarrass myself. If I am in a situation in which I can't ask, then I will take the initiative to research until I find the answers I need. It is unrealistic to expect myself to have information that I haven't been taught. Whatever another person knows, someone gave them that information at some point in time. You can believe that. So that's all for episode 3 in my Facebook Live series entitled Healing from a Trauma-Based Belief System. If you're interested in obtaining my cognitive restructuring cards, they are sold in a set of 100 victim-based beliefs or victim trauma-based beliefs, one set of villain trauma-based beliefs. They come with this workbook that explains how these dysfunctional or trauma-based beliefs are implanted into people's mind during the formative years. It also teaches people how to use my material, and there's worksheets in here that you can do over and over and over again so you can get free from these toxic beliefs. And I'm going to put the link to my store page in the comments section. I also have a workbook that is sold with these cards. So if you buy one workbook, you can just buy this workbook by itself without the cards. But this workbook is entitled My Unaddressed Issues Make My Budget and My Schedule. I have a master's in social work and a master's in business administration. So I know how to quantify the demands that these trauma-based beliefs makes on people's time and on their money. I had one woman go through my program and she said, Anneshia, I saved $500 this month by not obeying the trauma-based belief you have to assume the responsibilities of others. These beliefs are very time-consuming and they're very expensive. I also have a workbook entitled The Adult Reenactment of the Childhood Script. So I'm going to put the link to the store page, my store page on my website in the comments. I also recently released My Life Story. It's not on my store page. It's on Amazon. So I'll put the link to this where you can purchase My Life Story on Amazon. The book is entitled What Was I Thinking? The Anneshia Freeman Story. So I talk about my childhood of surviving horrific childhood trauma. So trigger warning. I didn't get graphic with the details, but I do talk about the trauma that I experienced during the formative years. I also talked about the adult reenactment of my childhood script. I didn't know that's what I was doing for several decades, but that's what I was doing. And I was self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. And then I talk about how I entered the recovery process in the year 2000. So I'll have 24 years clean and sober next month in August 7th. I'll have 24 years. And so I talk about my process of healing. I had to literally heal from every one of these. Now, most people don't have that many trauma-based beliefs that they need to heal from. but I did. And so I do believe that's why I was entrusted with this methodology. I had to develop it. But I believe it was because I can understand people who operate out of victim beliefs and villain beliefs. Most people, they struggle with one mode. I struggle with both. I would operate out of a victim belief at 9 o'clock and switch to a villain belief at 9:02. And some people found that out the hard way. I'm much better now. I don't struggle with them now. I've healed. It's been a long process, and most people, it doesn't take that long, and they don't have to do that much work because they don't have that many that they struggle with. But I did. So I'll put the link for my book that's on Amazon. I also, on my store page, have this book. It's entitled "What's Really Going On." It contains 31 cognitive restructuring articles that were featured in my bi-weekly column when I wrote for a multicultural newspaper. I wrote for that newspaper for several years when I lived in a particular city. So that's all again for episode 2. I also do individual life coaching. So if you're interested, I'll also put the link where you can sign up to work with me individually. In September, I'm going to be doing a group series, a private online via Zoom group series with people that is by the same title of this Facebook, YouTube live series, Healing from a Trauma-Based Belief System. So if you're interested, I will have that up on my website where you can register. And people who attend that, we're going to walk through. I'm going to walk you through this. And I'm going to give you a lot of additional tools that are not in the workbook. We'll meet for an hour and a half in the evenings. I haven't decided if it's going to be in the evenings or on a Saturday morning, but I'll have it up on my website soon where you'll get the workbook, you'll get the card sets. I'll walk you through it, and I'll give you some additional resources. I'll give you some advanced techniques to help you heal from trauma-based beliefs. That's all I have for today in this episode. Enjoy the rest of your day and join me next week for episode 4 in my Facebook and YouTube live series entitled Healing from a Trauma-Based Belief System.